Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so excited to have you for today's Fireside Chat, the future of SOC readiness and cyber resilience. My name is Talon Hester with Cloud Range. Once again, we're all really excited to be here and to see everyone who's joining us today. We're going to have an informative session with expert speakers and are excited to have you join the discussion. I want to introduce you to Dr. Ed Amoroso, CEO of TAG Cyber, a global research and advisory company that supports enterprise cybersecurity teams and commercial security vendors around the world. Debbie Gordon, she's the founder and CEO of Cloud Range, the industry's leading cyber range as a service solution to reduce cyber exposure across the organization. Before I turn it over to Ed and Debbie, a little bit of housekeeping. The Fireside Chat will be about 40 minutes long and a recorded version will be available. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please use the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar, and Ed and Debbie will answer questions as they come in or at the end. So without further ado, let me hand this off to Ed Amoroso and Debbie Gordon.
Well, thank you, Talon. Appreciate the intro. And Deb, I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Likewise.
A little intro, and then Deb, I've got some things I want to have you share with the folks. First of all, for those of you here live, if you have a question, drop something in. I know quite a few that you will be listening to the recording afterwards. And if you do need to get in touch with Deb or myself, it's easy enough to get in touch. We'll make sure that you know how to do that. Neither of us are wallflowers, so if you have any question, you'll have no problem. I want to share with you, the first time Debbie told me about her company a few years ago, I remember thinking, there's three things that we worry about as practitioners in protecting infrastructure. One is your people, the second is process, and the third is technology. And I remember it occurring to me, sort of I should have known a lot longer ago, that these live sort of simulation training, particularly for SOC teams, they touch all three of those. It's one of the few places where you're both driving improved capability amongst your team, your people, also checking and validating readiness and the ability to follow a procedure and to deal with certain live campaigns, and definitely tech. You're using a platform, and these exercises are happening in the context of your SOC. So I have to tell you that it's hard to find something that one should not love about doing, in some sense, attack simulation for your SOC, which is what Debbie and her team focus on. Deb, I want to welcome you to the discussion. Very excited to chat. I always enjoy when we get together.
I do too, Ed.
Great. Well, Deb, I want to start with a word: readiness. This is something that comes up a lot. I know when people ask me, what's one thing I should worry about, as a practitioner, I usually pretty tempted to say, just make sure you get the readiness right. Take me a little bit on the journey here. You've been at this for a while, and I know readiness has been one of the primary objectives of your solution. How do SOC teams use the solution? And how do you sort of determine readiness? What's been your approach?
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited about the discussion too, Ed. So I was a Girl Scout growing up. And our motto, and I think for the Boy Scouts too, is be prepared. And so readiness is not just about making sure you have the right technology and processes in place and that you're compliant, but it's ensuring that the people who are the last line of defense, who that's often the folks in the SOC and the IR teams, that they are ready. And it's one thing to say ready because people can feel that they're ready, but how do you actually measure readiness? So the way that Cloud Range has been able to do this very successfully is that we work with SOC teams all over the world, and they get to experience live immersive attack simulations on our very protected range environment. And the key to that is the word protected and safe. Just like a flight simulator, pilots don't want to be landing an airplane in a thunderstorm using a real airplane the first time they do it. They want to be able to practice in very realistic simulation. And so by doing this proactively, using our Cloud Range platform, teams and individuals within those teams are able to proactively prepare for different types of attacks that we develop and launch through our range in an automated fashion so that they have anything from very simple to very complex attacks to detect, respond, and remediate. And they do this as part of a program. It's not just a one-time thing that shows their performance, but over time, we're able to show increased performance, which at the end of the day is a reduction in risk and a reduction in cyber exposure.
What's been your experience in the difference between, say, training a team, a group, versus individuals? Like you mentioned, pilots, the image comes to mind of the pilot in a simulator all alone, kind of through that's not really the experience that you guys provide. It's a little different, a little more involved. I would
Absolutely.
imagine. How does that work? What are the dynamics?
So cyber defense is absolutely a team sport. Individuals within the team need to have distinct skills and abilities, but when you put those skills and abilities together as part of a team, people need to know how to use those skills, when to use those skills, and most importantly, why. So decision making, I mean, just like a pilot as an individual in a very pressure heavy situation, no pun intended, but high pressure in a SOC during an incident, people have to be able to work together. And so I like to use a lot of sports analogies. So if you think about the rules to, the rule book to baseball, somebody can know those rules. Somebody can have individual distinct skills like pitching, like sliding, like throwing, but put them on a field with a team, very, very different, because they have to be able to make decisions quickly, communicate with other people in order to win the game. And that's the piece that until Cloud Range had really been missing. That's what we refer to as the last mile of competency. And that's how we see the improvement in teams.
One thing I know you and I've been talking about recently are the advances that offensive teams are making, like with artificial intelligence, more automated attacks. Do you find, as you're talking to SOC teams, that they really need to up their game now? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but I'd love to hear a little bit about this, because you've been doing this for a while. And I'm just going to guess that it was maybe a little bit easier to do this a few years ago than now. Now it seems like the attacks are really pretty intense, very automated, and now intelligent. Well, what's been your experience with that?
So yes, they are getting more complex. We're able to get very complex with our attack simulations. So we function as the bad guys. We turn it into automated attacks. So we, when we're doing our simulations with our customers, there's not a person behind a curtain that is being the red teamer. We build all that in an automated fashion, but we actually use a lot of AI in our development to mimic what the bad guys would use. And then obviously there's countermeasures that the blue teams can use using AI. And, we also have to be careful not to depend on that too much, and ensure that people still have critical thinking skills, that they have situational awareness. But the more complex the TTPs are, the more people have to be on their game. And I think just in general, people always ask me, why is this important now? It's always been important, but it continues to get even more important because of the expanded attack surface with so many more devices, with IoT. Just everything is so much more connected. The complexity of the TTPs, AI being used by the bad guys, all the different technologies that people have to learn. And, for every attack that's out there that we hear about on the news, it creates more and more awareness of it, which, for better or for worse, creates more jobs, more open seats, which in my eyes, open seats are a vulnerability. If you need somebody and you can't fill that seat, that is a vulnerability for the organization.
So the simulations that you're developing, they come from, I presume, live sort of scenarios. Is that what you mean by live fire? Like you're taking these are very realistic. Take me through the experience. I'm assuming you strap in and then you're dealing with a live incidents as a group.
Yeah.
What it's like?
So what our customers do, and this is, you know, large organizations, anyone really with a dedicated security team. Some may have internal SOC, some may outsource a tier or level 1 or 2. But at the end of the day, it's any company who is investing in cybersecurity, which is most. So the way we do it is up to 10 people at a time log into the Cloud Range platform. They are seeing a live enterprise network. So it's representative of their own network. It has the same tools and technologies. So whatever SIMs and firewalls and EDRs they're using. And then we have, of course, things on the OT side. So it's real. And I'll take you back to the flight simulator analogy. You want the flight simulator to look and feel like the plane you're going to be landing and flying. So they're accessing the same tools. We developed a very robust traffic generator that has good and bad traffic running through it. It represents exactly what would go on a corporate network, times of day traffic changes. And then the attacks start to happen. And similar to if you've ever done an escape room, you don't even know what you're looking for. So we don't tell people, this isn't a situation like a tabletop exercise where you outline the situation and you say, okay, by the way, this just happened. What do you do? They don't know what just happened. They have to detect anomalies. They have to investigate things because that's how it happens in the real world. And so with the combination of the very robust Range platform, all virtual, so there's no hardware, people log in, they drop into a SOC workstation, they're seeing traffic, they have access, they actually have root access to every system on that network. You know, how fun is that? Because they can't do that in their day job. And they get to see things that they've only heard about. And one of the things about SOC analysts is that most people have never actually seen an attack happen. They're mostly cleaning up after it or something bad has already happened. They get to see everything play out and be able to see how that really shows up and how to work together. And so over the course of a few hours, they are detecting and responding and remediating this attack, communicating with each other, and they're measured on simple things like time to detect and time to respond, but then also things like communication and collaboration. And then finally, there are metrics that map to the NICE cybersecurity education framework, the MITRE attack framework, and all of this goes into our risk indicator, or it's a human readiness risk indicator that allows people to see, or allows boards and C-suites to see how that improvement is happening. And very simple data that's easily digestible by non-technical people to look at how they are reducing risk in their organization and the benefit of that investment.
What do you see with your customers? Do they get better quickly, or is it?
Absolutely.
Do you see very quickly, like a drop off in amount of time to deal with this or that? Help me with some of the metrics, because that sounds kind of cool.
Yeah. So just from more initially anecdotally, I'll share with you. Sometimes I jump into a training session on Zoom. I'll just pop in and listen for a while. And one of the things that is so evident, and nobody really talks about this, is confidence. So many SOC analysts, they know a lot, they're afraid to do things. And so because they don't want to mess something up. And so when people are in a safe environment on the range, in a Cloud Range simulation, they can mess up, we can reset it really quickly, but we encourage that. And in a matter of a few hours, we see people's confidence go up because something that they thought they know how to do, or they could do, they proved, and then they can go back and do it successfully and do it confidently. Now, in terms of the actual measurable results, at the end of every session, usually companies are doing about once a month, and every mission represents a different cyber attack, and it depends on the industry, depends on the team, depends on the skills and competencies of them and where they're starting and where they need to go. But we do a report at the end of each one that outlines all of the different scores, both for the team performance and the individuals within the team. We do a quick exercise at the end, And I'll be happy to share some example reports with people if you all want to get in touch, and we can obviously show you a demo too. And then each one builds on the previous. And so the missions are very valuable in and of themselves, obviously, but then we're able to find and report on improvements in things that are common denominators among all of the exercises cumulatively. So, another sports analogy is it's like golf. You're never finished. You're never finished being good. You don't one day say, okay, I'm the best golfer I can be, and then you stop practicing. There's always more to learn. And with cyber, as you know, Ed, the things are just getting more and more complex. So you're never finished. So it's an ongoing proactive improvement process.
The individual versus team metrics, interesting. I know you and I have talked about that. I remember you telling me once that when a team member or new team member is being, say, interviewed and evaluated, that sometimes you could actually use a live fire simulation.
Yeah.
See, do people do that? Like the bring
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a
so with
different
this
way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the talent shortage, obviously, security leaders are trying to hire people, and even though they may find somebody who may have a great resume, may check all the boxes on qualifications or certifications, you and I both know that people can be great in an interview and have a great resume, but as soon as you put them in the fire, you don't know how they're going to perform. So the candidate assessments called Fast Track that we have, they actually we put a candidate through an exercise on the range, and it can be customized based on the tool set that the customer has. So, if they're using a specific SIM or firewall, whatever the person's going to be working through, we can put them in a live exercise as an individual, or even part of a team, if they want to really get risky or crazy there, kind of like Survivor. But the leader can see how they perform, and three things will happen. One, they don't perform well at all, and it was clear that they weren't so good. Number two, they're going to perform great, and good, let's hire them. Number three, which is 90% of them, are going to be somewhere in the middle, and the middle is perfect because if they have the will and some of the skill, you can train somebody. And so doing this assessment sets a baseline. We have a learning plan for every participant. So all of our customers that use learning plans. So wherever somebody starts, if they're super green, there's a learning plan to get them up to speed and have continuous learning. If they're very advanced, same thing. Here's a learning plan to continue that advancement. But doing that assessment allows the team to know where's this person starting and where do they need to go from there.
Very interesting. We have a question from Don that I think is a good one. It's about 0 days. And he's more or less asking, when you're simulating, usually the simulations are based on things we've all seen. I'm wondering, what's your philosophy and what's the dialogue you have with clients who say, hey, I'd like to be exposed to situations we're not aware of, or maybe even brand new types of things? What's been your experience there?
So communication and collaboration among the team members is most important. If it's something that people have not seen before, we always say, see something, say something, and somebody might know, have one inkling of how to handle it. But the more that teams are communicating with each other, the better, because it can't be up to one person to figure things out.
So I think, and I'll chime in a little bit because I know Don's asking about zeros. I mean, there's only so much you can do with 0 day. The whole essence of a 0 day exploit is it's something that appears in the wild, we all freak out, and then the instant it's been made available is by definition not 0 day. So I guess in theory, it would be possible to have like a research team that finds 0 days and introduces it via simulation, but I wouldn't recommend that. That wouldn't seem like very responsible disclosure. So Don, my point would be, if we do find out about 0 days, probably way better approach to go through the responsible disclosure. It'll circle back and find its way into range training. That would be a better way.
Yeah. And we're using different sources of threat intelligence to develop our attacks. So when we've got a huge library of attack scenarios, and they're all very, very valid, and we're constantly developing and releasing new ones. We use obviously CISA advisories, So rather than just reading about something and, hoping you can understand it, we actually can turn that into a live attack scenario and make it very useful and actionable. So there's different sources of intelligence that we're using.
Is there a lot of prep that people have to do before a session, or do they just kind of sit down, strap in, and get going?
So there can be prep. It depends on the level of the individuals within the team and the team as a whole. We have a product called Flex Labs, and Flex Labs are individual training modules. So when I was talking about baseball before, and somebody can know individual skills, how to pitch, how to slide, Flex Labs is supplemental training for individuals to work on certain skill sets so that they could potentially be more prepared for a live fire simulation. But then also, so it's kind of a circular thing, after a live fire simulation, we also prescribe some of the Flex Labs to fulfill some of the weaknesses or opportunities for growth that individuals in the team or the whole team may need. So it's, simulation, team simulations, cyclical with individual training modules too. So they're used as prep, but then also as follow-on.
I want to talk a little bit now about management and reporting, because you and I talk a lot about this. Obviously, a senior leadership team, and definitely a board, they're not going to need details of like a campaign. That would be dumb. They wouldn't understand. Right. So we wouldn't kind of get into that. But how do you communicate, again, back to readiness? How do you communicate to a board what's going on here? Is it about, hey, we're getting better, don't worry about the details? Or is there something they can latch onto? I'm just imagining myself sitting in a board seat, and the CISO comes in and says, hey, we're doing training with Cloud Range, and we got a 71, or like, right. We wouldn't know what that means. Like, what, how do you do that? That seems like that's harder to do than it is to say or describe.
Yeah. Well, first off, board members I talk to a lot of board members, and the number one sentiment that they have around this is fear. Because and the fear comes from the unknown. They don't understand it. They read about some terrible breach, and all they want to know is that their company is doing something about it. They don't know how that's going to be done. They just want to see evidence that they are doing something about it. They are getting better. And they want to feel safe. They want to feel confident, because obviously there's, big responsibility by boards of directors, and they're personally liable. And so we make it very simple. We provide them reports. So there's some standard industry frameworks that we report against. So we don't just say, okay, our opinion at Cloud Range is that you are improving, and yeah, go. We're mapping this against standard well adopted industry frameworks. The NICE framework is one example. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is another example. And all the reports are things that can be understood. I joke, by a kindergartner. Everyone understands the value of preparation. And so if you, in its simplest form, if you can say, these are all the things that you need to know, and this many, there's this many more that you need to know, and we're going to shrink that. And obviously I'm simplifying it significantly, but we show them over time, here's what they're working toward.
Yeah, here's what, again, I'll go back to a typical board member. What they really want to know is the team any good, and are they getting better? Like, for example, I'm a college professor, I teach at NYU, and sometimes I get in front of a class and I'll say, wow, this is a good class. You can just tell. And other times, maybe not so much. You can tell that It might be maybe a less skilled group. Do you guys have, and maybe this is a little bit of back to your baseball analogy, maybe this is inside baseball, but how do you handle the case where a team that's going through training looks like they're really struggling? Like, they might be just terrible, and then they're getting less terrible, and you'd be graphing them getting better. How do you communicate that, whoa, this is a team that needs help, versus, say, a team that's amazing and like at the top level, but maybe isn't progressing because you're already, an A+, A triple plus. Does that question make any sense? I'm not.
It absolutely does. And I will tell you, in our customer base, we work with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, and they range from
Some
green
bad,
to
some
very
good, the
advanced.
whole thing. Yeah.
And this is not about, this type of training and readiness is not about showing, showing a board or showing a CEO that their team is weak. It's about showing, here's what we need to do to strengthen them, because there is it's so hard to find people. So if you have people that are committed and willing and able to learn, that's your starting point. So it's not like, okay, they're not so good yet being the operative word. We're not going to go fire them all and try to find other people, because that's doesn't exist. It can't happen. And so one of the things that I've been so just thrilled with seeing over the last 5 years is the evolution of security leaders knowing that they have to grow their own talent now. They can't just keep plucking from another company because it's perpetuating the problem. There's an estimated, 4 million people or open jobs in cybersecurity globally. And, when I founded this company, it was 2.5 million. So it's getting worse and worse and worse. You can't just keep hiring around. You have to create. And then to the second part of your question about teams who are, or individuals who are very advanced already.
Really great.
That's great, but there are so many different types of attacks that they still have to be ready for. They may just be more advanced and have more experience, but at the end of the day, people are only as good as the experience they have, the type of attacks that they've detected and responded to. And so the more exposure they have, the more complex we can make these things. We can layer attacks upon attacks. There is always more for them to do. You don't win the Super Bowl and then stop practicing. It's just you continue to have to work harder and become better. And kudos to those companies who continue to invest in those people. And then the other thing is, as these teams are growing, there's more people being introduced into these teams. So even though you may have, let's say 10, 15 people who have been there for a while and are really advanced, you introduce some new people as those teams are growing. That changes the dynamics. You have to enable them to learn from each other and just continue to grow as a team.
We have another question that's come in about different sectors. Like a question, I'll sort of paraphrase. Do you treat banks different than manufacturing companies, different than, say, transportation or telecom?
Great question.
All the same, or what? How do you tailor?
Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, CloudRange launched the CloudRange OT platform. So we have a very, very robust virtualized OT and IT range. So as I described earlier, when somebody logs on, they're seeing an entire enterprise network. So we also developed an OT segment, and organizations in critical infrastructure are able to experience live attacks. So we have virtualized PLCs and HMIs in there, and then the attacks are they can come from the IT side into the OT side and vice versa. We work with the major OT cybersecurity companies in the range. For example, we've got tools like Clarity and Nozomi in the range, Industrial Defender also. And so banking as an example, I call them traditional cyber attacks, the data exfiltrations. Yes, they are a little different, but more similar than anything in the OT side. Banking and healthcare, they are different. The scenarios may be different, but they may have some attacks types that are more prevalent. Healthcare may have, ransomware may be more prevalent than something in banking. And third-party attacks may be more prevalent in certain industries as well. So all the scenarios are very relevant for them. OT is the very distinct difference because of how people get in. And then the other element of OT that makes it extremely interesting, I'll say, is that organizationally, companies in critical infrastructure, there is a very big disparity between whose job is security. Is it the people on the OT side or the IT side? And a lot of companies haven't figured that out yet, and they need to figure it out. And so this is a whole other webinar discussion. We've actually talked a lot about this in the past, but we're now seeing a lot of success with our customers in critical infrastructure. Whether it's manufacturing, whether it's nuclear energy, and how they have to come together as an organization first And then the technology and the processes and procedures follow that.
What are the prospects here for compliance and regulatory groups to be more, I think, engaged and supportive of this? You and I've chatted about the SEC, some of the regulations that they tend to be more at the management level, like board representation and so on. But what's your view about, say, live fire simulation as at some point a flat out mandatory requirement?
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's not, but you're closer to this than I am. Where are the regulators and compliance assessors?
So the first, I'll say the general attempt at something similar is the requirement for companies to do tabletop exercises. And that's not new, right? But the problem with tabletop exercises is that often they're a check the box exercise. And they simulate something already happened. They're very paper based. You might pretend that somebody from the FBI just came in and said, "Oh my gosh, we just found 100,000 of your customer records on the dark web. What do you do?" And then everyone gets in a room. They figure out what they're supposed to do. You've got legal, you've got PR, you've got the CEO, you've got the counsel, and then everyone realizes, "Oh my gosh, we didn't really know what to do. We learned what to do," and then they go home and they do it again a year later. But that isn't there's not a lot of actionable things that often come out of tabletop exercises. It is often, I'm not saying this for everybody, it's a check the box exercise. And so being able to, now that we have a product called Tabletop 2.0, which is really the next generation of tabletop exercises, we're able to take that, add the actual live fire component to it, bring in the people in the organization who are actually involved in the detection and incident response, have them communicate with the board and the C-suite during this live incident, which is obviously simulated, and then make it actionable. And that's the most important piece, is what did we learn? What do we need to work on? So similar to some of the metrics that I shared earlier, when we go through a simulation with just the SOC or GFIR team, we're able to say, here's what's prescribed, and then let's come back and do it again in a few months. And so being able to have something that's more standardized and measurable, because sometimes when you standardize things, they become less relevant and useful. So we've found a very happy medium between standardization and actual usefulness and value. And we've done that with Tabletop 2.0. And so we're seeing that as something, insurance companies are starting to require things that are more robust than just a simple tabletop exercise. But at the end of the day, they need it to be reported on in such a way that is valid. So we've been able to do that.
I'm going to keep an eye on that. That's a good trend. I wish that would go faster.
Yeah.
The insurance industry is a good place to push, because they increasingly have so much influence in this. Sometimes I think outsized influence, but whatever, as long as they're saying the right thing, I don't care where it comes from. But let's see. Hey, we're coming up upon the 40 minutes. I want to take the last couple of minutes, give you the opportunity to talk to people who might want to get started with this. Like, what's the first step? What should they do to get going with a program of simulation?
Sure. So I always say that some is better than none. It's kind of like going to the gym. If you can't make it for 5 days a week, 1 or 2 is okay. And so we do what we call a single mission. And so we work with an organization to put together an actual simulation of the team. We plan it just like we do a simulation in one of our full-blown annual programs. And so it's a great way, number one, to improve your readiness in just a single session. But as you're looking at budgeting for readiness training, this typically doesn't come out of learning and development budget, by the way. This is part of IT budgets. This is part of, a security readiness program. It's a great way also to then go to your, as you're budgeting, to show the improvement and the response and results of this single exercise to be able to get budget. And so we've seen have a lot of success. Our customers have had a lot of success doing that, because it is really a new line item. This didn't exist 5 years ago. And so now that organizations are seeing it, when the flight simulator was invented, you didn't not use it. When your iPhone was invented, you didn't, you need it now. And it's the same thing. And so we help companies get the budget, and obviously in a very short period of time, you can see the benefits. And the other thing that it does, it really engages your team members. SOC analysts love doing these exercises. And so it's not the type of training where they look, roll their eyes and feel like they have to do it. They really look forward to it and improving their skills and readiness. Our website is cloudrangecyber.com, and we will be happy to do a demo and arrange a single mission for you and your team. Best way to get in touch is info@cloudrangecyber.com. And for companies who are doing a single mission as their first one, we have a great pricing on that, just because we want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to do this.
Well, Debbie, keep up the good work. I've always been a big
Thank
fan. It's an absolutely wonderful component of any operational cybersecurity program, including now OT, which is good because OT guys always hated this stuff.
Yeah.
Good that they're doing it. So it's wonderful to keep going. So on behalf of our community at Tag Cyber, the people listening, and for those of you listening on the recording, I want to thank you, Deb, for sharing some real
Thanks,
nice.
Deb. I appreciate it very much. You keep up the great work too.
Yeah, it's all good for the community. So we'll keep it going. Talon, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts to close us out, but I appreciate everybody's time.
Once again, just want to thank everyone for coming. If you do have any questions, please reach out to info@cloudrangecyber.com. Thanks again.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.